There is a battle being fought for your mind at this very moment, not in the distant trenches of foreign wars, but here, in the theater of your own consciousness. And the most terrifying part? You might not even know you're losing. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. Onward, thinkers. My name is Mister Halvig, and you're watching The Rational Wise. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just a psychiatrist. He was an archaeologist of the human soul, excavating the darkest territories of the psyche. Jung understood a disturbing truth. Most people live under the spell of invisible forces, manipulated by masters they don't even recognize as their puppeteers. Jung discovered that our vulnerability to manipulation isn't a bug in human nature. It's a feature. We are, by design, suggestible beings, shaped by forces operating in the shadows of our unconscious mind. But here's what manipulators don't want you to know. Jung also left us a map, a set of signs almost imperceptible that reveal when your mental autonomy is being hijacked. Over the next 20 minutes, you won't just learn to identify these hidden signs, you'll develop the vision of a psychological detective. By the end of this journey, you'll possess something few have, the ability to see through the masks of manipulation and reclaim control over your own mind. But know this, once you see, you can never unsee. Prepare yourself. The first hidden sign is when your perception of reality begins to be systematically questioned. Jung called this psychic gaslighting, when someone plants seeds of doubt about your own mental sanity. Jung understood that our psyche has two guardians, the conscious ego and the collective unconscious. The skilled manipulator attacks the bridge between these two worlds, creating cognitive dissonance that leaves us vulnerable. When we don't trust our own perception, we become dependent on the reality others offer us. Consider the story of Grigory Rasputin and Tsarina Alexandra of Russia. Rasputin didn't control Alexandra through force or wealth. He controlled her perception of reality. First, he created emotional dependency by healing her hemophiliac son. Then, systematically, he began questioning her own decisions and intuitions. "You don't understand the spiritual forces at play," he would whisper. "Only I can see the truth." Gradually, Alexandra lost confidence in her own judgment, transferring that authority to Rasputin. The result? The fall of a dynasty. In the modern world, this manifests in toxic relationships, manipulative corporate environments, and even on social media. When someone constantly questions your memories, your feelings, or your interpretation of events, they're applying this ancient technique. Defense number 1. Keep a journal of events and emotions. When someone says that never happened, or you're being too sensitive, consult your records. Defense number 2. Trust visceral discomfort. Jung called it body wisdom. Your unconscious detects manipulation before your conscious mind processes it. Sign 2. Selective emotional vampirism. The second sign is when your emotions become fuel for another person's emotional state. Jung identified this as the transfer of psychic energy. You feel drained after certain interactions, while the other person seems revitalized. Jung believed that every human interaction involves an exchange of psychic energy. Balanced people create mutually beneficial exchanges. Manipulators, however, are emotional vampires. They extract without giving, drain without nourishing. They instinctively identify your emotional vulnerabilities and exploit them as energy sources. In the court of Louis XIV at Versailles, there was a lady named Madame de Maintenon. She possessed neither extraordinary beauty nor abundant wealth, but she dominated through selective emotional vampirism. She identified the king's moments of vulnerability, his doubts about war, his anxieties about death, and positioned herself as the only person who truly understood him. She fed on his insecurities, offering comfort just enough to maintain dependency. Eventually, she became his secret wife and one of the most powerful women in France. The king, one of the most powerful men in the world, had become emotionally dependent on someone who nourished herself from his weaknesses. Today, this happens in relationships where one person is always in crisis, always needing emotional support, but never reciprocating. In professional environments, they're colleagues who always bring personal dramas, sucking your energy, but disappearing when you need support. First, monitor your energy levels after specific interactions. If you consistently feel drained after talking to someone, that's a signal. Second, implement the emotional reciprocity rule. Observe whether the person offers support when you need it, or if the relationship is unidirectional. Sign 3. The architecture of invisible guilt. The third hidden sign is when you find yourself constantly apologizing or feeling guilty without being able to identify exactly why. Jung called this shadow projection, when someone projects their own failures and guilt onto you. Jung discovered that we all possess a shadow, aspects of our personality that we deny or reject. Skilled manipulators are masters at projecting their own shadow onto their victims. They make you carry the weight of their own inadequacies, transforming you into a receptacle for their unprocessed guilt. Observe the case of Lady Macbeth and her husband. Shakespeare intuitively captured this psychological mechanism centuries before Jung formalized it. Lady Macbeth plants the murderous ambition in her husband, but then projects all the guilt onto him. "You lack courage," she whispers, transforming her own lust for power into his moral failing. She architects the crime, but he carries the psychological weight. In the end, she achieved the power she desired, while he was destroyed by the guilt she projected onto him. It's a masterclass in manipulation through shadow projection. In the modern world, this manifests when your boss makes you feel incompetent for their own management failures, or when someone in a relationship makes you feel difficult for having legitimate needs. You become the repository of their inadequacies. Technique 1. When you feel guilty, ask yourself, is this guilt genuinely mine, or is it being deposited on me? Technique 2. Develop what Jung called the inner observer, a part of you that objectively monitors emotional dynamics without getting involved in them. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. Sign 4. The hijacking of personal narrative. The fourth sign is when you realize that the narrative of your own life is being rewritten by another person. Your motivations, your successes, your failures, everything is reinterpreted through the lens of someone who isn't you. Jung believed that our identity is constructed through narratives we tell about ourselves. Manipulators understand this instinctively. They become the unauthorized editors of your personal story, rewriting your chapters to serve their purposes. Joseph Stalin was a master of this technique. He didn't just rewrite the official history of the Soviet Union, he rewrote the personal stories of his subordinates. When Nikita Khrushchev had military successes, Stalin reinterpreted these successes as results of his own superior strategy. When Khrushchev made mistakes, these were amplified as personal character flaws. Gradually, Khrushchev began to see his own history through Stalin's eyes. His successes were luck, his failures were incompetence. Stalin had hijacked the personal narrative of one of the Soviet Union's most capable men. This happens when someone constantly reinterprets your achievements. You only succeeded because you were lucky, or your struggles. You're exaggerating. It wasn't that difficult. Gradually, you begin to doubt your own version of events. The arsenal. First, keep a record of your achievements and challenges in your own words. Second, when someone reinterprets your experience, question, how can this person know better than me what happened to me? Up to this point, you've identified the fundamental signs, the inversion of your perceptual reality, the emotional vampirism that drains your energy, the invisible architecture of guilt, and the hijacking of the narrative that defines who you are. These are the pillars upon which all manipulation is built. But now we enter more dangerous territory. The next three signs aren't just about recognizing manipulation, they're about understanding how master manipulators orchestrate the systematic destruction of your psychological autonomy. What you're about to learn is knowledge that few possess, and even fewer are willing to teach. Knowledge is power. Power is dangerous. If you've made it this far, you're ready for the darkest truths. Sign 5. The manipulation of temporal architecture. The fifth hidden sign is when your relationship with time is distorted. Master manipulators control not just what you think, but when you think. Jung observed that our temporal perception is deeply connected to our sense of autonomy. Jung understood that the human psyche operates in multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously: past, memories, present, immediate experience, and future, expectations. Skilled manipulators know that by controlling your perception of time, they control your ability to make autonomous decisions. Haste creates vulnerability, hesitation creates dependency. Observe Adolf Hitler's rise through this temporal lens. Hitler didn't conquer power through logical arguments. He orchestrated a symphony of artificial urgency. "Germany is dying now," he would scream. "We must act today, or we will be destroyed tomorrow." He systematically eliminated reflection time from the German population. Each speech created a temporal crisis. Either you acted immediately, or all would be lost. He transformed an entire nation of thinkers into reactionaries, manipulating their perception of time until impulsive action seemed the only sensible response. Millions of people made decisions that would normally take years to consider in a matter of moments. In the modern world, this manifests in high-pressure sales. This offer expires today. Toxic relationships, if you don't decide now, I'm leaving. And corporate environments, we need this decision by end of day. The manipulator creates an artificial sense of urgency, or conversely, drags processes indefinitely to create anxiety. Golden rule. Whenever someone insists on an immediate decision for something important, that's a red flag. Standard response: important decisions deserve adequate consideration time. Second technique: identify your natural decision-making rhythm and protect it fiercely. Sign 6. The hierarchical inversion of values. The sixth sign is when your fundamental values begin to be subtly reordered without your conscious awareness. What was once important becomes secondary. What was secondary becomes primary. Jung called this inverted psychological alchemy. Jung believed that our value hierarchy is the operating system of our personality. Sophisticated manipulators don't attack your values directly. That would create resistance. Instead, they gradually alter the relative importance of each value, like a hacker reorganizing codes in a program. Consider the case of Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Jones didn't start by telling people to abandon their families and die for him. He began by highlighting noble values: social justice, racial equality, community service. Gradually, he elevated these values above other fundamental values like personal autonomy, critical thinking, and family bonds. Your dedication to the cause, he would whisper, is more important than your personal doubts. Eventually, people who deeply valued life and family were convinced to poison their own children because Jones had reordered their value systems. The value of group loyalty had been artificially elevated above the value of life preservation. This happens in relationships where you gradually begin to value harmony over honesty, or in work environments where company loyalty becomes more important than personal ethics. You don't notice the change because it happens through incremental micro-adjustments. First, make a list of your 5 most important values and revisit it monthly. If the order has changed drastically, investigate why. Second, when someone asks you to compromise one value for another, ask yourself, who benefits from this reorganization? Sign 7. The colonization of intimate psychological space. The seventh and most subtle sign is when you realize you no longer have truly private thoughts. Your internal conversations begin to include another person's voice. Your dreams are influenced by their concerns. Your intimate decisions are filtered through their opinions. Jung identified what he called intimate psychological space, the last frontier of human autonomy. It's the space where you have honest conversations with yourself, where you process emotions without external judgment. Master-level manipulators aren't content just influencing your behavior. They colonize this sacred space. The most shocking story of this comes from CIA files on the MKULTRA program. Dr. Ewan Cameron developed what he called psychic driving, a technique where he not only brainwashed his victims, but installed internal voices that continued the manipulation work, even when he wasn't present. One of his victims, Linda McDonald, reported years later that even in her most private moments, she heard Cameron's voice commenting on her choices, judging her thoughts, guiding her decisions. She had lost not just her memory, she had lost her mental privacy. Cameron had become a permanent tenant in her mind. This happens in intensely codependent relationships, where you can't make simple decisions without imagining the other person's reaction. You lose the ability to have your thoughts. Everything is filtered through the perspective of someone who has colonized your mental space. Decolonization technique. Number 1. Reserve daily time for private thinking, moments where you consciously exclude all external voices. Number 2. Practice what Jung called autonomous internal dialogue, conversations with yourself where you deliberately don't consider anyone else's opinion. You now possess something rare, a map of psychological manipulation. 7 signs that reveal when your mind is under attack. The inversion of your perceptual reality, the vampirism that drains your emotional energy, the invisible architecture that makes you carry guilt that isn't yours, the hijacking of the narrative that defines who you are, the distortion of time that eliminates your capacity for reflection, the subtle reorganization of your fundamental values, and finally, the colonization of your most sacred mental space. Jung taught us that individualization, the process of becoming truly yourself, is life's most important task. But how can you individualize if your own mind is being orchestrated by others? This knowledge you now possess is a double-edged weapon. It can be used to protect and liberate yourself, but it can also be used to manipulate others. Jung believed that with great consciousness comes great responsibility. Use this wisdom to build authentic relationships, not to create dependencies. Use it to defend yourself, not to attack the vulnerable. Remember, true psychological freedom doesn't come from dominating others, but from becoming indomitable yourself. Which of these 7 signs did you recognize in your own life? What awakening did this bring you? Your experience could help others recognize their own situations. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. If this journey through the depths of the human psyche resonated with you, if you value knowledge that can transform your life, join this community. We'll continue exploring the darkest and most powerful territories of the human mind. In a world full of manipulators, your lucid mind is your most powerful weapon. You weren't born to be anyone's puppet. You were born to be the author of your own story. Jung left us the tools. Now it's up to you to use them. Your consciousness is your castle. Guard it well. Your thoughts are your kingdom. Rule them wisely. Your mind is your sanctuary. Keep it sacred. Onward, thinkers!